to become more effective and to have a better ability to serve. Those are great things. And what I'm going to talk about this morning is kind of a balance to that, you might say. So, we've all watched children in the nursery, right? There's that 2-year-old stage where children have a concept of ownership and control, right? So this slide, I don't know if you can see it very well, but this was something I found. It's the toddler's rules of possession. And it's, if I like it, it's mine. If it's in my hand, it's mine. If I can take it from you, it's mine. If I had a little while ago, it's mine. If it's mine, it must appear never to be yours in any way. If I'm doing or building something, all the pieces are mine. If it looks just like mine, it is mine. If I saw it first, it's mine. If you're playing with something and you put it down, it automatically becomes mine. I think that's a kind of a good illustration of the natural way that we think from a very young age. So generally, we try to live our life in a way that we are constantly advancing at one speed or another. If our progress becomes slow, we begin to be depressed, angry, frustrated even. We have many ways of expressing this. Just treading water, living paycheck to paycheck, working for the man, eking out a living, or living hand to mouth. That's not what we want to experience, is it? We want to have things to look forward to, extra money to buy nice things that we want. We want to have big margins for emergencies, retirement, hobbies, vacations, upgrades, additions, and charities. The children of Israel had these same ways of thinking. And as they experienced slavery in Egypt, the 10 plagues of judgment that God brought on the Egyptians, God's salvation, bringing them out of slavery, even though his constant presence with them on their journey in the pillar of fire and smoke, or even through that. I want to walk this morning through the times in their journey that Israel tested God. And let's see if we can see some patterns that we can learn from. They really experienced a lot, didn't they? Can you imagine witnessing what they witnessed? The power of God and the 10 plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, the miracles just came left and right during that time. And I love reading about this period because I think it's one of the best samples we have of what it's like to be so close to God, because Moses talked to God face to face, and we have his recording of all that interaction. And so to me, it's a fascinating way to get to know God better. So I want to start, let's start with Exodus chapter 14, where the children of Israel lacked faith before crossing the Red Sea. And I don't know, some of these slides you might not be able to read because I had to kind of pack a lot in, but I'm going to read through it, so hopefully you can read it or you can look it up as we go along. But Exodus chapter 14, verse 10, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to have served the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. The Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they will go in after them, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots and horsemen. Do you see the contrast between what the Israelites were thinking in their natural abilities, in their own preservation, their fear, their lack, their limitation, versus God with his unlimited creative power and purpose? Let's go on to the next example. This is Exodus chapter 15, where they complained over the bitter water at Marah. Starting in verse 23. When they came to Marah, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. That is why the place is called Marah. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we to drink?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood, and he threw it into the water, and the water became fit to drink. There the Lord issued a ruling and instruction for them, and put them to the test. He said, "If you will listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." So you see, God not only provides, but he's got a bigger purpose. He's providing instruction. He's testing them. He's training them. So we need to be aware of that in our own lives. The third example is Exodus 16, complaining in the desert of sin. Verse 3, they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month, after they had departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, "Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill us, this whole assembly, with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not." The fourth example is Exodus 16, starting verse 19, where they were collecting more manna than they were supposed to. And Moses said to them, "Let no one leave any of it over till morning." But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it till morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it, each as much as he could eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. And next example is in Exodus 16, starting in 25, where they were attempting to collect manna on the Sabbath. Moses said to them, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none." On the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the sixth day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the seventh day." So the people rested on the seventh day. So you can see the human thinking is there's no food in the desert, right? But God provided. And then the human thinking is, well, I'm going to get as much as I can and store it up while I can. But that's not what God was going to provide that every day, and they didn't need to do that. And then the human thinking is, well, I'm going to have to gather on Sunday too, because I need to eat on Sunday. But God had a different plan. Example number 6 is in Exodus 17, complaining over the lack of water at Rephidim. All the congregation of the people of Israel moved on from the wilderness of Sin by stages, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord? But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? So Moses cried to the Lord, What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me. And the Lord said to Moses, Pass on before the people, taking with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and waters shall come out of it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Number 7, Exodus 32. Engaging in idolatry with the golden calf. We're familiar with the story. I'm not going to read all that event. There's much more to it. Excuse me. My throat's going to give me trouble this morning. So starting in verse 7, it says, And the Lord said to Moses, Go down, for your people, whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt. Remember, Moses is up on the mountain receiving the law, the 10 Commandments. They have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way that I commanded them. They have made for themselves a golden calf and have worshipped it and sacrificed to it and said, These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, in order that I may make a great nation of you. But Moses implored the Lord, his God, and said, O Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt, with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, With evil intent he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your burning anger, and relent from this disaster against your people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self, and said to them, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have promised I will give to your offspring, and they shall inherit it forever. And the Lord relented from the disaster that he had spoken of bringing on his people. I don't remember the exact time, but it was like 30 days or something that Moses was up on the mountain, and that's how long it took the Israelites to want to adopt a new God. So it doesn't take long for us to be away from God's influence to start seeking our own gods. It's amazing. Number 8, Numbers chapter 11, verse 1. And the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So the name of that place was called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. Example number 9 is Numbers 11, verse 4, complaining over lack of food. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving, and the people of Israel also wept again and said, Oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, and the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks and onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance like that of bdellium. And the people went out and gathered it and ground it in hand mills, or beat it in mortars, and boiled it in pots, and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. When the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell with it. Moses heard the people weeping throughout their clans, everyone at the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. Moses said to the Lord, Why have you dealt ill with your servant, and why have I not found favor in your sight, that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I give them birth, that you should say to me, Carry them in your bosom, as a nurse carries a nursing child, to the land that you swore to give their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give all this people? For they weep before me and say, Give us meat that we may eat. I am not able to carry all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If you will treat me like this, kill me at once. If I find favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness. Then the Lord said to Moses, gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their stand there with you. And I will come down and talk with you there. And I will take some of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you may not bear it yourself alone. And say to the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, will you give us meat to eat? For it was better for us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall not eat just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected the Lord who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why did we come out of Egypt? But Moses said, the people among whom I am number 600,000 on foot, and you have said, I will give them meat, that they may eat a whole month. Shall flocks and herds be slaughtered before them, and be enough for them? Or shall the fish of the sea be gathered together for them, and be enough for them? And the Lord said to Moses, is the Lord's hand shortened? Now you will see whether my word will come true for you or not. So we see here that even Moses' faith wasn't where it should be. He was thinking in human terms and forgetting the power of God. The 10th example is in Numbers 14, where they were failing to trust God and to enter the promised land. Then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night, and all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. This is after hearing the report of the 10 spies, and they believed 12 spies, they believed the 10 spies who gave the bad report. The whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to one another, let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the people of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, the land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Then all the congregation said to stone them with stones, but the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the people of Israel. After Moses begs for mercy for the, this is after. So I'm going to skip a little bit of the passage here. Moses begs for mercy for the people of Israel. Verse 20. Then the Lord said, I have pardoned according to my word. But truly, as I live, and as all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have yet put me to the test these 10 times, and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers, and none of those who despised me shall see it. So that's the strong justice of the Lord for their wickedness and not believing his power to bring them into the land. So God pronounces this judgment, and then in the 11th example here in Numbers 14, verse 36, we see the reaction. And the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land, who returned and made all the congregation grumble against him by bringing up a bad report about the land, died by plague before the Lord. Of those men who went to spy out the land, only Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh remained alive. When Moses told these words to all the people of Israel, that is his judgment, that none of them would enter the land, that they would die wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. The people mourned greatly. And they arose early in the morning and went up to the heights of the hill country, saying, Here we are. We will go up to the place the Lord has promised, for we have sinned. But Moses said, Why now are you transgressing the command of the Lord, when that will not succeed? Do not go up, for the Lord is not among you, lest you be struck down by your enemies. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites are facing you, and you shall fall by the sword, because you have turned back from following the Lord. The Lord will not be with you. But they presumed to go up to the heights of the hill country, although neither the ark of the covenant of the Lord nor Moses departed out of the camp. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and defeated them and pursued them even to Hormah. Then we have Korah's rebellion in Numbers 16, starting in verse 1. Now Korah the son of Izhar, son of Kohath, son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men. And they rose up before Moses with a number of the people of Israel, 250 chiefs of the congregation, chosen from the assembly, well-known men. They assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, Separate yourselves from among the congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. And they fell on their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and will you be angry with all the congregation? And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Say to the congregation, Get away from the dwelling of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And the earth, skipping a few verses here, so they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. And all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, Lest the earth swallow us up. And fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense. But on the next day, all the congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and against Aaron, saying, You have killed the people of the Lord. And when the congregation had assembled against Moses and against Aaron, they turned toward the tent of meeting. And behold, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared. And Moses and Aaron came to the front of the tent of meeting. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Get away from the midst of the congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. And they fell on their faces. And Moses said to Aaron, Take your censer and put fire on it from off the altar, and lay incense on it, and carry it quickly to the congregation, and make atonement for them. For wrath has gone out from the Lord, the plague has begun. And Aaron took it as Moses had said, and ran into the midst of the assembly. And behold, the plague had already begun among the people. And he put on the incense and made atonement for the people. And he stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stopped. But now those who died in the plague were 14,700, besides those who died in the affair of Korah. And Aaron turned to Moses at the entrance of the tent of meeting when the plague was stopped. So we can kind of see in that example, there's actually two rebellions in that one, because there was Korah, and then immediately after, all the congregation rebelled against Moses and God as well. The next example is in Numbers 20, verse 2, and this is the complaining over lack of water again at Meribah. Now there was no water for the congregation, and they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And the people quarreled with Moses and said, Would that we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. Why have you brought this assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, that we should die here, both we and our cattle? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is no place for grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink. Then Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, Hear now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their livestock. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, Because you did not believe in me to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the people of Israel quarreled with the Lord, and through them he showed himself holy. So you remember in that passage where God told Moses to speak to the rock, and Moses had some lack of faith. And I think he was probably remembering back to the time where he struck the rock before with the same staff that he used to part the Red Sea. And again, he came back to that human form of thinking, right? Where this is what we've done in the past. This is what works. If I hit the rock with the staff, that makes more sense than speaking to the rock, because I've never spoken to the rock before, but I have hit the rock before. So you see how our human thinking goes back to our own capabilities, our own intuition, our own experience. Number 14, complaining over food and water from Horeb. This is Numbers 21, verse 4. From Mount Hor they set out by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the people became impatient on the way, and the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water. We loathe this worthless food. Then the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people. They bit the people so that many people of Israel died. And the people came to Moses and said, We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. So Moses prayed for the people, and the Lord said to Moses, Make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten, when he sees it, shall live. So Moses made a bronze serpent and set it on a pole. And if a serpent bit anyone, he would look at the bronze serpent and live. Idolatry at Peor, Numbers 25, verse 1. While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, Take all the chiefs of the people and hang them in the sun before the Lord. Then the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. And Moses said to the judges of Israel, Each of you kill those of his men who have yoked themselves to Baal of Peor. And behold, one of the people of Israel came and brought a Midianite woman to his family in the sight of Moses and in the sight of the whole congregation of the people of Israel, when they were weeping in the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose and left the congregation and took a spear in his hand and went after the man of Israel into the chamber and pierced both of them, the man of Israel and the woman, through her belly. Thus the plague on the people of Israel was stopped. Nevertheless, those who died by the plague were 24,000. So these are some examples. I counted 15, but there's 2 in the one, so it's probably 16 different times that Israel tested God. I would like to wrap up these examples with a contrast. On the one hand, you have this effort that we naturally exert to become greater. The Israelites could see no way by their own power to even live and survive the wilderness, let alone make any advancement by their own power. Their only solution was to wish that they were slaves in Egypt again. But it's not our own power that makes us great, is it? Our natural inclination is to be able to make ourselves the greatest of all time. I want to look at Moses' last words to Israel in Deuteronomy chapter 8, starting in verse 11. He says, Take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command you today, lest when you have eaten and are full and have built good houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks multiply and your silver and gold is multiplied and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart be lifted up and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground, where there was no water, who brought you water out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna that your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and test you, to do you good in the end. Beware lest you say in your heart, my power and might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your fathers, as it is this day. And if you forget the Lord your God and go after other gods and serve them and worship them, I solemnly warn you today that you shall surely perish. Like the nations that the Lord makes to perish before you, so shall you perish, because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God. So we have a contrast between our natural inclination to advance ourselves by our own effort, by our own skill, our own powers. And we have this mentality of going from nothing, which is where we start, right? We're born in the world as babies. We're totally dependent, and we have no skill, no experience, no resources, and we strive to get to in a place of abundance, of control, of safety, of security, affluence. That's kind of what our lives look like from a human nature standpoint. Let's contrast that with what we read in Philippians chapter 2, verse 1. So if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significantly than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also the interests of others, having this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. And here's the key point. Jesus, who though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. I think we should consider that. What was it like for Jesus to be with God in heaven? To be God in heaven. He had everything we could ever aspire to achieve. He was the greatest of all time. Yet, he humbled himself and left from being at the top of heaven to become nothing. He became a newborn baby to a poor family, a human being on earth. Maybe that thought will help us to understand a couple of other verses that came to mind. John 6:38, for I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. John 6:38. And then Philippians 2:9, continuing that passage earlier, says, therefore God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And Matthew 16:24 says, then Jesus told his disciples, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? Let me ask this. How much are we investing in our own advancement? By whose power do we really advance? Are we willing to follow Jesus' example and humble ourselves to nothing in order to allow God to work through us? There's some powerful thoughts to me. I hope I've been able to communicate well enough, but God's word is even more capable, and I'm so thankful for it. Are you ready to allow God to take responsibility for the heavy lifting and be content to obey his commands and see his glorious accomplishments be fulfilled around you? In what ways is God testing you to see how much faith you have? If you haven't given your life to Jesus Christ, he's ready and waiting at the door of your heart. The choice is yours to let him in.